Hello, welcome to the next video in our Python object-oriented programming course. Today we're going to cover Project 2, which is going to be a classes-based version of the rolling the dice program in our intro course. Just before I get into it, I put a couple links at the top. The first link is a link to our one-to-one tutoring for object-oriented programming in Python, and then the second link is for software design and engineering. So if you want to check out either of those, let me change the window a bit. These are the two links for them, and we do offer one-on-one tutoring for these subjects. So you can check them out, but right now I'm going to get to the video. So before we can start coding the program, you're going to need import random so that you can choose a random number, not between 19 and 20, but between 1 and 6. So to get a random number between 1 and 6, you put in the parameters 1 to 7. So this means if you import random, this print statement is going to print a random number between 1 and 6, because it's between 1 and 7, but not including the 7. So if I just ran this line of code a few times, you'd see a number 1 down here, and number 5, number 4, but it's always going to be between 1 and 6, because it doesn't include 7. And then 1 is the starting parameter, 7 is the stop parameter, and again, not including the 7. But just to get to it, there's only a couple things we can make a class for. And that would be the players and the dice. It's a very simple program. So the project is a 2-player game. Each round, both players are going to guess the number on a rolling dice, and the player that guesses the most number of times wins the game. The program starts by asking the players the number of rounds the game needs to be played. So let's do this. Let's do rounds equal, let's just code the game first, and then we'll code the classes. So rounds is input how many rounds of rolling the dice do you want to play? We could do a for loop. So for x in range rounds, do play game. We'll make a play game function that plays the rolling the dice game, and then we'll run it through a for loop for each round. So that would be the best way to organize this. So we'll do play game. We'll define a play game function. Oops. Okay. So for play game, player A is asked to guess the number between 1 and 6, and then player A gives the input, and then the dice is rolled by a program. In this case, the dice is a random function which generates a random number between 1 and 6. Okay, this is where we're going to need our random function. If the dice roll generates the same number which a player guessed, he receives a score of 1, else he gets a score of 0. Then player B is prompted to enter the number, and the dice is rolled, and he scores above. And that's a round. So you get 1 point for guessing the number correctly. You get 0 points for guessing incorrectly. And whoever has the most amount of points wins. Okay. So let's do. Might just write some pseudocode. Pseudocode, if you don't know that term, what it means is you write kind of like placeholder code to just get an idea on your editor, and then you modify the code later so that it actually works and properly and is organized. But so play game will have the wrong comment. player A, ask player A for a number, roll dice, 1 point if correct, 0 points if incorrect. Then we'll ask player B ask player B for a number, same thing, 1 point if correct, 0 points if incorrect. And then we'll add the points to the player total. Okay. And then outside of play game, we'll have this. We'll have an if statement. We'll have an if, an elif, and an else. So if we'll just say player A has points is greater than player B. And again, this is commented because it's pseudocode. It's not real code. It's just putting an idea in the editor, and then we're going to write the code for it later. So if player A has more points than player B, print a message. Player A wins. I'll put this commented too, because we can like add names and things like that to the player class. So player A wins. And then this will be player B wins. And then player B wins if player B's points are greater than player A's points. I'll just keep A and B in the same spot, change this. And then else, which should be equals, print the game ends if a tie. And we don't need to put that in pseudocode because we don't need to. We don't need to change that message depending on player names. Okay, so the play game function is going to be at the bottom, and it's just going to play one round. I'll rename this to play round to make it more clear. And then this will be at the end of the game, which will print who wins. And then the for loop will be to play as many rounds as you want. And then at the top, we're going to have to define our classes. So we need a player class, so class player. And then we need a dice class, so a class dice for our player and dice objects. So we need to get our constructor. So I think we only need to define one variable, which is the faces of the die. So we'd have self dot face array equals 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then actually I'm going to make this a static variable because it doesn't need to be defined in the constructor. And then for player, we want a name for a player, and we want a point count. So we'll have self.name, we'll have self.points. So name is name, and then points is points. And then dice is just going to have face array. Then we can have a print function that says how many points you have. So and name has points. I'll put that into a string. Self.points, self.points, self.name. So player name has points and then many points. Or I'll just put the points. Okay. So this function, if we call it, is going to print how many points the player has. And then each player object has a name and has a number of points. And then we could have we really don't need a lot for the class. This is a very simple program. But you can definitely go back after the program's finished. You can definitely go back and add to the classes if you want to add extra functions, or if you want to make the game more complicated. Okay, so this is just going to be if. Okay, so we need to take in the player names. So create two player objects. Player 1 is input. No, it's just a player object. To this player. And then we can input the name. Player A, please enter your name. Better yet. /n is new line characters. That means skip a line. So I'm just putting a couple. I'll put one skip line. So it's more clear when we're asking player A for their name and player B for their name. So player A, please enter your name. We'll copy this for player B. Player B, please enter your name. Okay. So we don't need this. Okay, so we okay, so we import random just because the code is all over the place a little bit. Because I wanted to code the main program first and do some pseudocode. We import random because we need the random function to pick a random number between 1 and 6 for the dice rolls, and then the game is played by seeing if the player guessed the correct number out of 6. So we need random to be able to pick random numbers. We have two objects in the program, which are the player class and the dice class. So a player has a number of points and has a name that you ask for, and then the dice just represents the dice object, which is used to play the game. The game starts by we ask the players for their names. So so we ask player A, please enter your name, and this is a parameter. And see how it's inside the parentheses of the player object? That's because it fits the name parameter. So we also need a number of points. So the player is going to start with 0 points. Each player is going to start with 0 points. So this whole input is the first parameter of this player object. That's why there's a comment here. And then this input statement, what it's going to ask is it's going to ask the player for their name, and then it's going to put it in for that parameter, which is the name of the player A. Then we do the same thing for player B. So we just created 2 players, and then they enter their names, and they start with 0 points. So now we need to ask them how many rounds they're playing. And then let's say they enter 10 rounds, and then we play 10 rounds of the game. So we go through a for loop 10 times, and each time we play a round. And then we had the 3 if, we had the 3 conditionals. If player A had, we should make player A. So we had this. We had if player A's points is greater than player B points, player A wins. If player A has less points than player B, player B wins. And then if neither, which means they're equal points, the game ends in a tie. By the way, elif is kind of it's the keyword for else if in Python, which means instead of just a regular if-else statement, it's if-else-if, and then the else-if is like a second out of 3 or a second out of 4. So this is like so if you have if, elif, and else, if is the first statement, else the last, and then anything that goes in between would have an elif. So if you had 10 conditionals, then the first one would be if, the last one would be else, and then the 8 in between would be elif. But we only have 3, so we only have 1 elif. But so we say if player A has more than player B, player A wins. So the message we're going to print is player A is player 1. So we'll do it should be lowercase. So we'll do we'll print player 1 dot name plus wins the game, and then we'll copy this down here, player B. So player B is player 2, and then the conditions would be player A has more points than player B. So this would be player 1 dot points is greater than player 2 dot points. And we can copy this over here, and then just reverse the sign, and then else it's a colon. Game ends in a tie. Okay. And then we need our play round function, which is you ask player name for a number. So input player1.name. Please enter a number. Number guess. Wait, dice. I'll just put a number guess. We'll do an if else. If which should be stored in a variable, so it should be player guess. So if player guess equals so do another statement. Print the die is rolled. Die for singular dice. The die is rolled, or the die rolls the number plus rand range, random dot rand range. So 1 to 7, just like before. Store that in a variable. So we'll do die roll. Okay, so we roll our die. It's a number from 1 to 6. We store it in die roll. Then we print the message. The die rolls the number plus die roll. Okay. So we roll a number from 1 to 6. We print a message to tell the players what was rolled. And then we say if player guess is equal to die roll, player 1 dot points plus equals 1. And then the else would be, actually we don't even need the else because we can just keep the score the same. So they get 1 point if they guess correctly, and they don't get anything if their guess doesn't match. So we can copy this code for player 2. We can reuse the same player guess variable. So we ask player 2, please enter a number, and then the die roll is the same. Die rolls the number die roll, and if player guess equals die roll, player 2 dot points plus equals 1. And again, plus equals means take the total that's in player 1 dot points and then add 1 to that total. So that's why it's not just plus, it's plus equals, because you're taking points, you're adding 1 to it, and then you're putting it back in player 1 points. You're doing the same thing down here with player 2. It's shorthand. So our play round function, we ask each player for a number, and then we add the points. So we don't need the pseudocode anymore. And then we should probably print a message saying we should have an else. Player 1 dot name scored a point. And it could be the same thing. These is player 2. Didn't score any points. Didn't score any points. But without an exclamation point. Okay. So our play round function plays 1 round of the game. So we have a player guess function. Player 1 enters their guess. We roll a number from 1 to 6. The die rolls the number, whatever. If the player guess is equal to the die roll, give player 1 a point, and then print a message saying they scored a point. If it doesn't equal the die roll, so we go into the else, then we say the player didn't score any points and we don't do anything to the points total. And then we do the same thing below, just for player 2. And we reuse the same player guess variable, because why not? And then, yeah, this is a completed. Parentheses, C++ in me. Okay. So this plays one round of our game. Everything's completed. This the play game. This is our end message. This is plays the game, plays a round. I'll just say plays the game. Number of rounds. Play game function. Or play round function. And then create player objects. Actually, it doesn't really make sense to have a dice class for this. So we'll just have the player class for the player objects. But you could make a dice class. It's just in this situation, we don't really need to keep track of any variables in the die. You could make a class, but you'd be using more code than you need to. If there were certain variables you needed to keep track of in a die, then you could create it with a class. But or you could do that for extra credit if you wanted to practice your skills. Okay. I have no warnings. So class use our function over here at points. Just copy and paste this. Has left. Player 1, player 2 has player 1 dot points left. Okay. And then our end message will say he wins. We're just putting a bunch of new line prints in just to make everything look cleaner at the bottom later. This up. So this should run. So we have our player class. We create 2 players. we enter how many rounds they want to play. We define our play round function. This should really go at the top. Put it below our class. And then, so we ask for the number of rounds. We play our rounds, which we already defined up here. And then there are no more rounds left. We say how many points each player has. Left. And then our end message determines who wins the game. Okay. And then just for playing a single round, we already checked. Okay, so this should run. Okay, so player A, enter your name, so we'll do Michael. Player B, enter your name, Daniel. How many rounds would you like to play? We'll do 5. 7. So we'll do this integer. Okay, Michael enter guess 1. Line 58 in module play round. 24 and 58. 24. Okay, so our die rolls need to be converted to strings for the message. Should go through all our print statements. Name's always going to be entered as a string. Name's always going to be a string. These need to be strings. Okay, try again. Player A, Michael. Oops. Player B, Daniel. How many rounds? We'll do 3. Michael, enter number guess 3. The die rolls a number 6. He didn't score any points. Daniel, pick a number 4. Die rolls 5. Daniel didn't score any points. Michael, enter guess 6. Didn't match, didn't get any points. Daniel 1. Rolls 4, didn't score any points. Michael, I want at least 1 success. So we'll do 6 again. 6. Okay. Okay, so we have a bit of an error. The entire program ran, but in the last line, Daniel scored, he should have scored a point. Michael is 0 points, Daniel is 0 points, the game ends in a tie. Okay, so everything worked except for the fact that when Daniel rolled a 6, the die rolled a 6, and we didn't add any points. And Daniel was player 2. I'll just make an add points function. Define add points. Do points plus equals 1. Self.points. Okay. Then we'll do player1.add points, player2.add points. We don't need a plus equals. Okay, now let's run again. A, Michael. Actually, I'm gonna need new lines for every round. So we'll do print new line. Run again. Player A, enter your name. I'll do Michael. Michael. Player B, enter your name. Daniel. 20 rounds. Do 3 rounds. Michael, enter a guess. 2. 5. Didn't score any points. Daniel, enter a guess. 3. Okay. Daniel didn't score any points. So it's jumping to the else. Player guess 2. I'm thinking it might be because it's reading it as a string, not as a number. Yeah, I think that's exactly why, so we don't need this. Okay, try again. Player A, Michael. Player B, Daniel. How many rounds of rolling? We'll do 2. Michael, please enter a number. 2. Didn't score any points. 2. Didn't score any points. 2. Didn't score any points. Didn't score any points. Play again. Michael, Daniel. 2. 2. 2. Nope. Did 5 rounds. Michael, Daniel. 5 or 4 rounds, I guess. Michael, enter a guess. 1. No points. No points. No points. Okay, now it's working. So the error we had before was this condition wasn't being checked properly because our player guess wasn't. It was being read as a string, and it is not as a number. So a string is never going to be the same as an integer. So die roll here, it's always an integer because random range always returns an integer, or returns a number. Here, player guess, we take it in as a string with the input function, and because of that, we have to turn it into an integer when we're testing our condition. So even though the program ran, we still had a bug, which was we weren't processing when a player was scoring points because we weren't comparing an integer to an integer, we were comparing a string to an integer. So it was like we were comparing the string 6 to the integer 6, which are 2 different things. Okay, so we'll finish our game, just put in some random guesses. Okay. Who scored the points? Okay, Daniel scored a point. Okay, Daniel and Michael each scored 1 point. So this is correct. There are no more rounds left. Okay, the game ends in a tie. Okay, yeah, everything's correct. So their total number of points was calculated correctly, and then the game ended in a tie because each of them scored a point. And we played 4 rounds. Okay. So just to review really quickly, we imported the random library, or the random module, because we needed our randRange function, our random.randRange function to pick a random number between 1 and 6. Then we created the player class, which a player has a name and a number of points that they can, total number of points that they can have. We have a print points function, which we use at the very end to display their total points before picking a winner. And then we had our add points function, which adds a point to the player total if they get a correct guess. We have our play round function, which plays a single round of the game. Takes in a player guess. We roll a number between 1 and 6 randomly, and then if the die roll, whatever the die roll is, we print it as a string. And then if the player guess is equal to the die roll, and again we have to put the player guess into an integer because it's taken in as a string. If they're equal, you give player 1 a point, and then you print that they scored a point, and if not, you just print that they didn't score a point, and you do nothing with the point total. And then you repeat for player 2, and then player 1 and player 2 each play their part in 1 round, and then we have our for loop, play 20 rounds of, well, up to 20 rounds of the game. And so we played 4 rounds in our example. And then this is just the main program. So we created our player objects. We asked how many rounds they wanted to play. Then we played that number of rounds using our play rounds function. The player objects are from the class, and then after we play however many rounds we want to play, we print there are no more rounds left, and then we print the player totals, and then our end message declares who wins the game. And because each player only scored 1 point, the game ends in a tie. Okay. So this is our completed Guess the Rolling Dice program. And we will have one more project in our object-oriented programming with Python course. So thanks for watching, and have a good day. Bye.